God's design for marriage. That does not mean that I treat people who disagree with me with anything but respect, right? So that's where I think folks get a little bit wild, is they say, well, because you disagree with me, because we have different perspectives based on faith, for example, as far as human sexuality, God's design for marriage, those type of things. Like, people believe all sorts of things in the United States, and I'm very much a big tent Republican in the sense of saying, come on, we can agree in certain areas and not in other areas, and it's fine. And that's where I think some of the, particularly Christians, have said, okay, because of some of my perspectives on human sexuality in this context, then I need to be somehow mean or unkind to other folks who disagree with me. And that's where I break company with that. I don't see any biblical evidence for that, and I don't think it's a great way to engage the political space.
Everything you just said is well taken and well spoken. And then there's this.
Oh, wow.
I'm sorry. It is 14. I'm sorry. 8335 writes. Randy McNally also loves Georgia Boys butt rub.
That is.
I don't think that's what it's called.
It's funny.
At Savory Spice.
It's funny.
It is funny. And I like funny. I think we need more funny in our lives.
Look, Matt, engagement and encouragement. That's whenever I do something wrong from now on, I'm going to be like, you don't understand.
And by the way, in our last conversation before the top of the hour between Cameron and myself, and Cameron and I have been around the block. We've been friends for a long time, and we've got into some fierce debates on there. They're never personal to me, and I know sometimes they sound that way to you guys. Cameron knows better. But here's where I do get fiercely defensive of the First Amendment because that's the business that I'm in. I understand that the debate is whether or not hosts on Fox News knowingly presented false narratives on their programs. I mean, that's the and in doing so, did real damage and harm to a private business, Dominion, right? And Dominion's arguing that they knew very well that the narrative. Sure. And by the way, the narrative that Sidney Powell was putting out there and whatever his name was, it was just garbage.
If your nickname's the Kraken, I sort of have questions.
Garbage narrative. It wasn't true, and I'm sad that so many people fell prey to it. There were a lot of truths being told, but that was not one of them. That said, the question is whether or not some of the Fox hosts were simply presenting their side of the argument without, diving into whether or not they believed it true or not, or if they believed it not to be true and they presented it as if it was.
Right.
And that's fair?
And to Matt's point, Matt and I, we do this a lot. It's fine. To his point, specifically saying there's a difference in, hey, somebody came on the show and said something that I might have personally believed is false, and me saying that. However, when you bring somebody on your show, you lend some of that credibility to them as, hey, this is at least a person that I think serious enough to have this conversation. And so that does weigh in the balance. And again, it's on Dominion to prove all this, right? And it should be a high threshold for that type of case. What I'm saying is I've been really surprised about the evidence that's already out there because it seems pretty damning.
Well, and for those of us who have been in this business for any length of time, and you mentioned defamation, I mean, you're well familiar with libel, slander, and the standard that has to be there. It's a much higher standard for a public figure because that individual has put themselves out in the public sphere. But even for a private individual, you have to prove certain things. It's a much lower standard because private individuals have a right to remain private. Right. And by writing about them in a column or talking about them on the radio, you're presenting them to the public in a way that they might not have wanted, so they lower the standard for that.
Yeah, which this is the reason why I've always any type of effort by politicians to limit the press's ability to criticize them, I oppose. Whenever I see a politician say, well, maybe we need new registration requirements for bloggers, we need new sort of limitations, we need to make it easier to sue the press criticizing politicians. Private folks, different. But when you're a public figure, when you're a politician, in the interest of furthering political speech, the answer is more speech. And I always want to protect that. And what's interesting in this case is it is a private company. This is a very public argument. So people are interested in it. But
I brought up during the break, we continued the discussion after we went to the news. And I brought up, well, the chill effect is potentially damaging to free and open debate. And I brought up Russian collusion as an example.
Sure.
Right? For 2.5 years, we know that regularly you had major media outlets, organizations that were presenting things that turned out not to be factual. I mean, the great example is Adam Schiff goes on CNN and says, I've seen it. I have seen the link. I have seen it with my own eyes, and it's coming out, and he's gone. He's out of here.
And he lied. He very much lied.
He lied. And so why would CNN not be held responsible for the lie? And the trouble is you have to find out what entity was harmed.
Right.
And it can't be the American people.
Right.
It has to be a specific harm to a specific organization or entity.
Yeah, and that's the big difference. Did he clearly lie? Yes.
Yep.
I mean, a lot of Democrats just made stuff up. In fact, that's always been kind of part of our political speech is people will say things, they'll get called on them, we have the exchange, and we kind of move on. Okay, I would much rather have those political debates and dialogues. I get it that sometimes, to Trump's credit, fake news, right? Like, they just make up a narrative they want to fit a political end. I see that all the think the answer to that is combat that rather than give politicians a break and make it easier for them to not be criticized.
But you think, based on what you've read, based on your legal background, that Fox News is in choppy waters here.
Oh, yeah. I mean, my concern and what I was trying to convey is there's a lot of information out there on that case just from what's publicly available in those discovery chunks that have come out, that's like, wow, like, I think you did know some stuff. Now, do they meet the burden of proof? I don't know. That's a question for a judge or jury.
Mm-hmm.
That's the case, right? But to your point, it's very easy for me to opine. I'm a columnist. That's what I do. In a legal context, you got to meet the burden of proof. Dominion's trying to do it. I'm just saying they got a lot more ammunition than I suspected they would have.
615-737-9986, either through super text or call. If you want to join in on the conversation, you're always invited. I got a dose. I don't know if you heard the beginning of the show. I got a dose of why everyone hates government so much last night, at least government bureaucracy. And this was a happy ending at the end of the 4.5 hour fair board meeting last night at the fairgrounds in Nashville. 4.5 hours. And every single person on the fair board knew how they were going to vote at the beginning of the meeting.
Right.
Yet they still sat around for 4.5 hours and blah, 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 blah. And anytime.
I'm speaking.
Woo,
I'm speaking.
It was that.
Okay?
Oh, Belle, were you there recording? Because that's what it was. A lot of that. Goodness gracious. Is it any wonder that people hate government? Anyway, that was my night last night. How was yours?
Better than that.
Oh, man. It was awful. But, it came to a good end, a good positive end. The vote was good, 3-2. So you got to pick Lindsey Graham or Ron DeSantis. Which
Really?
I just wanted to see the look on your
now
face.
make it uncomfortable. Give me like Lindsey Graham or Mitt. Like Mitt Romney. Like I just, man, on this Ukraine thing, we need to be we need to start with the conclusion we want and work backwards, right? Like, what's the end game here? I have yet for somebody to tell me, okay, is it restore Ukraine to its pre-Russian annexation border? Is it there's like a peace settlement between what are we going for? And then I can tell you what we need to do.
Well, the best answer that I can give you is you're either restoring it to this pre-current invasion borders, which means Russia keeps Crimea.
Right.
Or you're going all the way back to 2014, and that might be too big of a bite of the apple. I don't know. That would have to entail, Russia. I don't know how you would get there, but it's either one or the other, right?
Well, so my point is that I think that we need to go to 2014 because for Russia to basically be like, we've destroyed whole sections of Ukraine.
But we'll leave now.
But we'll leave now. See you guys. Like, to me, the Surrender Caucus, and a lot of Republicans.
It's like the House Party in Weird Science.
They're like,
remember that?
I'm not that old, man. But it's the surrender thing that people are doing that are like, well, we really need to get people. If you come to my house and you break in and start, I'm going to kill you, right? I'm going to get you out. I'm not. Well, let's sit at the table. What will it take to get to the table? Russia's clearly wrong here, right? So if I'm Ukraine, unless it's just all is lost, I'm not interested in having a peace settlement.
I'm not going to be one. I'm going to do this. This is not a smart thing for me to do, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Let's go.
Let me try to play devil's advocate. Let me try to play Putin's advocate here.
This is great.
The Ukrainian territory was Mother Russia's from the beginning, and it was in the Soviet era dismantlement that it was taken from Mother Russia inappropriately, and so we're just reacquisitioning that which was ours anyway. And oh, by the way, and I'm just once again Putin's advocate.
Matt does not want to bring back the old Soviet Union.
And oh, by the way, the people of that region, they consider themselves Russian anyway. Just ask them. Point of a gun, you know, right? But in his position would be that's not Ukrainian territory.
Yeah, his
that's
position
Russian
that
territory.
it's justified to take it and then take, I don't know, the rest of Ukraine because reasons, and it's not, right. And the problem is we got involved.
It's like Russian manifest destiny,
right?
Kind of. I mean,
well, but this is the problem. If we would have said they're not an ally, we don't want to get involved. This. I think the reason we had to was that it does have geopolitical implications. It does matter.
Would Ukraine have fallen without our participation?
Probably.
I mean, it's hard to say. It's hypothetical. But
I mean, it's shocking, frankly.
I mean, I honestly think, it's amazing that they didn't fall within the first several months. I mean, it's a testimony to, one, their resolve and their incredible willingness to fight. Grant them that. But two, Russia's not the military that we really thought.
No, they're not. And I mean, so what happened with this drone is something that people need to understand. The jets flew over it and effectively peed on it, right? And then knocked it down. That's
exactly what they.
That's what they did.
Released fuel.
Yes.
On the drone.
Right. This was not a tactical maneuver. This is like we are peeing on your drone.
You know what? That's why I have you once a week. You're just a jewel of Tennessee, because my dogs do this in the backyard all the time, right? One dog will go over and squat and pee somewhere, and then the other dog immediately goes to where that dog is, and he pees on top of his pee, and then he pees on top of his pee, and then at some point the big one gets involved, and we worry that one of these days he's going to pee on the little one's head.
Probably.
And that's what Vladimir Putin did to our drone.
So the idea that we would just be like, well, you know.
But what are we going to do?
But this is my point. If you don't know the end game, then you can't respond, right? And so instead you got Biden saying, well, the environmental impacts of this. I'm like, are you kidding me? They just peed on our drone and knocked it out of the sky.
I just asked Congressman John Rose, if you want to investigate environmental impact, I want to know about the environmental impact of the Nord Stream 2, which we were told was a Russian deal, but now we're being told it was some mysterious Ukrainian ally.
Are you suggesting the Biden administration is misleading on some of this stuff? I'm shocked, incredulous even.
You know what? I'm going to sue the Biden administration.
But
for defamation.
But my point is, until we know what the end game is, I mean, if you tell me the end game is we got to go back to 2014 levels, I tell Russia, here's the deal, guys. I'm not going to invade your country, but this is the border. Get your stuff out by this date. End of discussion.
But we have to act as leaders in terms of taking charge of those negotiation possibilities, right?
Yes.
And so you and I talking, right? We start with we're going back to pre-2014. But if all you can get is pre-2022,
sure,
would you take that?
No. Because these guys, you can't beat...
Even with reparations?
You can't... Okay. I'd play ball if Russia was going to basically issue an apology and spend money to rebuild what it's broken. Okay, they're not going to do that. If otherwise, they can't.
If they could get an agreement where they keep Crimea, so...
We're giving Ukraine random stuff, and they're holding them at bay. So my point is, this is not a military that I'm particularly worried about being a problem for us. And so China's certainly not going to come to their defense. And I think what we say is, we're not going to invade. We're not going to put boots on the ground. We're going to crush all your hard assets by date certain if you're not out. I'm
going to attack Cameron Smith over the use of one word in the sentence that he just delivered, and that word was certainly. Because I don't know if it's that, quote unquote. So I could be wrong. You could be wrong.
Yeah. At some point,
I doubt it.
But at some point, leaders have to make choices,
and
they might be wrong.
No, well, we'll talk about the possibility of negotiations in just a moment. And is Ron DeSantis' foreign policy take naive, as Nikki Haley is suggesting? It's 2:23 on Supertalk 99.7 WGN. It's Matt Murphy for LT360. LT stands for Life Transformation. Well, I'm in the process, and I'm not a perfect creature, and they understand that at LT360. If Coach Scott or Coach Elizabeth or Dr. Underwood or any of the other crew at LT360 are listening, I will admit to you that, yes, I had a donut earlier today. Cameron Smith is to blame. He brought them in. But that aside, LT360, they're not here to sit in judgment of you. They're here to help you. And every person that makes the call is after the general idea of getting healthier on a more holistic level, on a cellular level. But that doesn't mean that we're not human beings. That doesn't mean that we don't allow the devil to reel us in with things like St. Patrick's Day donuts from time to time. LT360 understands that. They understand that life happens, but they're going to get you back on track, get you back on process, and help you get healthy on a cellular level. And you know what happens as a result? You lose the weight. That's what it's all about. It's about weight loss, hydration, getting healthy, and getting active again. LT360 can tell you all of these things when you make the call that so many others have made. Go to their website at LT360.com. That's LT360.com. And when you call them, tell them that Matt Murphy, donut and all, sent you to LT360.
The bank collapsing and Nashville one step closer to having a return of NASCAR. All that and more coming up 2:30 Supertalk 99.7 WTN.
Supertalk 99.7 WTN. It's 2:28. Thinking back, Maury. We'll hear from him in just a couple of minutes. Hear from you on the phone, 615-737-9986. Kimberly has called from Clarksville, wants to talk about Ukraine and the Russians. Hello, Kimberly. Good afternoon.
Hi. You know what? I wanted to mention something. When the war first started, the people that were you talking about Donetsk or Crimea when you were talking about the people that were speaking Russian that considered themselves Russian?
You talking about Donbass region?
Yes. Okay, so wait a minute. Let me take you off speaker. Hold on one second.
Oh, that's perfect. Yeah, we love non-speaker. Yes.
Sorry.
No, you sound great.
Okay, here we go. All right. So from what I learned, I'm going to pull it in here so I can talk to you. From what I learned, when the war first started, the people that considered themselves Russian and spoke Russian, most of those people left. The people that stayed behind, they may speak Russian and consider themselves Russian, but they do not want to be under Russian rule.
Right.
So they stay.
Yeah, I mean, either way, the idea, Putin clearly cast a narrative here that was
right.
like,
I mean, yeah, and I know you know this, Kimberly, but it bears repeating. I was just playing what I called Putin's advocate as to what he would argue the justification would be into reclaiming a region of the world that he still considers to be Russian.
Yeah, but he lied to his people.
oh, he lied.
Well,
He also said,
Remember that rally
Ukraine
that they had, and he stood out there and just started lying to everybody? I was like, oh my God.
Yes, this is
First
called
I thought-
propaganda. This is what he's doing.
Yeah,
and, this is
exactly.
his excuse for invading Ukraine was basically they're Nazis. So we need to save Ukraine from itself. We're protecting Europe and the world from the Nazis of the Ukrainian leadership. And that's garbage, right? He just made that stuff up.
I know, but I'm really torn. I hate that we're... Okay, so one thing that I did learn from a military family is it's not like they're sending cash. They're sending equipment, but they're sending a lot of equipment that's been in storage. And I got that from a friend who's in the Army. So,
Yeah, but Kimberly, understand this too. I don't mean to interrupt your train of thought, but
no, go ahead.
When Janet Yellen goes
Yeah.
To Europe and announces,
right.
that's cash.
Yeah, that was stupid. She's so dumb. Oh, my God.
Well, I
Woman
mean,
can't even speak sentences correctly.
I don't know what the breakdown is of the $115 billion that's been authorized thus far, but a lot of it is
forgot
money.
about that.
A lot of it is money.
So
right?
what's your end game? Like, what's the end game? What are we trying to accomplish here? Like, just let me know.
What I think about it,
Yeah.
I think we have to save these people. They're being slaughtered.
Agreed. So
And I
what,
hate
so
that
what's
we're
the end
taking
game?
money that we don't have. The end game is to push Putin back.
Yeah, and I think
He's getting very aggressive. You know what he did with the go ahead. Did you want to finish your
he
thought?
tinkled on the drone. Like that's what happened. He tinkled on the drone and knocked it into the ocean, and Biden said it was an environmental issue.
Yeah, right. He dumped fuel twice on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
He probably the one that blew up the. Did we ever figure out who blew up the that oil?
So would it not? Well, initially we were told that Joe Biden announced, and several people in his administration, just to back the story up, they announced that if Russia ever was to invade Ukraine, that Nord Stream 2 would cease to exist. He said cease to exist.
I heard him say it.
Right. So Nord Stream 2 has ceased to exist, and they blamed the Russians. And now most media outlets have walked that back, and they now, best intelligence, believe that it was at least a Ukrainian ally group that was responsible.
Oh, why? Because it was an environmental disaster?
Oh, it wasn't.
They're so worried about the environment, and then they dump all of that into the ocean and into the atmosphere.
Well, and by the way, unless proven otherwise, I believe that we did it. I believe the United States. Now, I believe it's just a matter of whether you think it was justified or not. I mean, some would say it was obviously a justifiable result of what Russia was doing. I don't agree with that. One way or the other, the media doesn't have any curiosity to investigate the veracity of the claims. They don't.
No, they don't.
Well,
but
I'd
the
like to
sad part is the environmental disaster. I mean, if you're going to do it, why do it in the water, in the ocean? Why did they do that? There must have been other places they could have done it if they were going to do it.
Well, I've got to
But
take
they're so...
Kimberly, I'm sorry to cut you off. I've got to take a quick time out, but I have a question to ask you before I have to go to the news. You ready?
Yeah.
If the desire is to get them out of Ukraine, you said that's the stated goal, to get them back, would it not make more sense to just go ahead and do that with America's military as opposed to spending all of this money?
I've got kids in the military. Absolutely. They're ready. They're itching. They want to go. They've been wanting to go. I'm up here at Fort Campbell right now. I'm pulling into my daughter's apartment. These boys want to go. They want this crap over with.
Love it. Love that response. Love that response. Kimberly, call again when you can. I appreciate your call. It's 2:33 on Supertalk.
It's 2:33. I'm Mac Maury with your top stories right now. 50 degrees, an absolutely gorgeous day right now in Nashville. No clouds in the sky and the sun is beaming high. We got a weather forecast coming up in just a few minutes. After the collapse of regional bank Silicon Valley Bank last Friday and then Signature Bank over the weekend, there's now word that Credit Suisse, a much larger financial institution in Europe, is faltering with all this banking trouble, much of it blamed on interest rate hikes. What effect will this have on the Federal Reserve's plan to hike rates again next week? Alexis Christoforous weighs in.
Banks large and small have been struggling with higher interest rates all year long. We've gotten 8 interest rate hikes from the Federal Reserve. And also, central banks around the world are really raising interest rates in concert to try to tame inflation. That's really a worldwide problem right now. So the Fed is going to have a real debate at its next meeting next Wednesday. Do they raise or not? If they don't raise interest rates, what does that mean for inflation? They might have to just do nothing at the moment and let the situation sort of calm down in the banking industry.
And here in Tennessee, Nashville, one step closer to the return of NASCAR.
A big hurdle was cleared last night when the Fair Board voted to approve an agreement with Bristol Motor Speedway to renovate the historic Fairgrounds Speedway. Officials say it's not going to cost taxpayers a penny. All of it, including maintenance, will fall on a private operator. There will also be money for the Fair Board to use for upkeep of the fairgrounds for years to come. As for nearby residents' concerns about noise, renovations include a sound reduction wall. 2 more steps before the deal is solidified. It has to pass the Metro Sports Authority and Metro Council. Ken Weaver, WTN News.
And that is the latest news. Weather's next. I'm Mac Morey, WTN News.
The Dr. Gill Center for Back, Neck, and Chronic Pain Relief, they want to see you. They have a new number for me to share with you. It's a number that I'm sharing in 2023 because they have their 2023 special. That 2023 special involves $23 and a complete and full examination of your issues. If you have back pain, neck pain, knee pain, spinal pain of any sort, joint pain of any sort, and you're taking pills to cover that pain up, it's time that you call the Dr. Gill Center for Back, Neck, and Chronic Pain Relief. They'll give you an examination. They'll give you x-rays. They'll look over those x-rays with you, and they'll come to some conclusions regarding their findings. And then they'll design a prescription for success. And that prescription does not involve pain pills, and it doesn't involve surgery. It involves a pain-free life through chiropractic care. Modern techniques at the Dr. Gill Center. Techniques like red light therapy, their class 5 lasers, spinal decompression. Ask them when you make the call that so many have made. 615-882-4838, 882-4838 for the Dr. Gill Center for Back, Neck, and Chronic Pain Relief. It is 2:39 on Supertalk 99.7 WTN. My name is Matt Murphy. I host a show from noon until 3 called The Matt Murphy Show, and I thank you for being a part of it. The Drive with Brian Wilson is up next. He's here from 3 until 7, a part of information-fueled and opinion-driven News Talk Radio, to include Michael Del Giorno, Nashville's Morning News with Dan Mandis as well. Cameron Smith, you hear him from time to time filling in when I'm absent or when I'm filling in for Brian Wilson, and you hear him on Wednesdays during the Murphy Show as well. Just breaking down just all the various aspects of the possibilities of real hot war with Russia, the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, and what are the outcomes. One thing we were discussing during the break, what the possibilities are that America will just kind of pull off the Band-Aid and actually get into hot conflict, pushing Russia out of Ukraine, if that's our purpose. And there are dangers involved in that.
Sure.
But it would certainly, and I'll give you this. I'm not saying I agree with it, but it would certainly send a strong message to China with regard to how we feel about the Taiwanese situation.
Yes.
And I think that's a greater global dynamic in the next 10 years than Ukraine will ever be.
Absolutely. And I hear somebody can credibly be an isolationist. I think Tucker Carlson's arguments are more isolationist, right?
Like agreed. Yeah, sure. I have a tendency to gravitate.
I don't think we have any business over there. Okay, I hear that. I'm actually sympathetic to it. Well, guess what? China does not see themselves as a regional power. China doesn't see itself as playing on a local stage. It's a global stage. Russia, even though they are clearly not super powerful anymore, still has aspirations to the global stage. For us to say, cool guys.
And a bunch of nukes.
Yeah.
And a bunch of nukes.
That's true.
Yeah.
For us to say, nah, we're just gonna keep our ball at home. We're not gonna do any geopolitics. It seems unwise. But I understand it. It is a clear position that people can have.
What is, I guess, in some way educational and in some way, understand where I'm coming from, fun as an exercise, but also infuriating, are these conversations where smart people, and I consider us smart people, talk about the various ways that we could extract ourselves out of what is a very dumb situation. And we were dumbed into this situation by a weak president and weak leadership when it comes to foreign policy. I think we agree on that.
Yeah, well, let's start in Afghanistan. Like, we haven't said Afghanistan a lot, but our departure from Afghanistan was chaos. It was not well done.
And embarrassing. Right? And it showed a vulnerability that maybe, like, we weren't up to the task of knowing what we were doing on the global stage. Well, guess what? People take advantage of that. They see opportunity. Now, Putin's miscalculation was he thought he had more clout than he did in terms of military strength and thought this would be over so fast that wouldn't be a real conversation. Yeah, everyone would be debating about how awful Russia is and what we should do to sanction them on the back end or whatever.
Yeah, economic sanctions. But he didn't actually think of this as a kinetic war where
I agree with
this was going to last this long. And now we're in it. At a minimum, it's a proxy war. And for us to leave and say, well, we're just going to stop. No more stuff. Bye. I think a lot of Americans look at that and like, we don't want to do that. But then a lot of Americans are like, well, we don't want to give them clear deadlines and say you must be out of here or else, because I don't like that. Well, then you are basically advocating for the status quo. And as somebody who's skeptical of the military-industrial complex, this just serves those folks. We're basically replacing inventory, and they're blowing it up over in Ukraine, and then people make money from making new stuff. Like, that's who this serves. This is not a plan. And that's been my ask all along is, what's the end game? What's the plan?
Let me offer this quote to you and see how you respond to it. Quote, while the U.S. has many vital national interests, securing our borders, addressing the crisis of readiness within our military, achieving energy security and independence, and checking the economic, cultural, and military power of the Chinese Communist Party, becoming further entangled in a territorial dispute between Ukraine and Russia is not one of them.
I think Ron DeSantis got the polling information, and I think other folks like him keep pushing that narrative, right, of, okay, we don't want to get further entangled. Okay, well, then what's the plan? I keep asking that. Do you want it to stop?
All right, so Yeah. What if I were to present to you that we no longer fund the Ukrainian war against Russia?
Well, I thought Republicans were against taking a knee. And in this situation...
Well, I'm not a Republican. This is Matt Murphy.
But
I'm telling you, what if I presented that the answer to your question is we stop sending billions of dollars to Ukraine and arms to Ukraine because it is a slow walk. I believe it's a slow walk toward American hot engagement with Russia. I think that's a bad idea. So my plan, I'm just presenting this to you, is we stop that funding. What happens?
Sure. And I think that's certainly a plan, and it's a rational one. One, we're going to then be watching Ukraine devolve. Russia will take that. Then China's going to say, see, these guys, they're not serious. They would rather throw some money at a thing and then quit. Same is going to be in Taiwan.
You don't think possibly Europe would step up and fill the void where America left?
Europe doesn't really have a great track record of doing that effectively. Donald Trump pointed that out. He's like, where are you guys? Why are you? Where are you going to?
I agree.
Where are you going to show your proportional?
I don't think it's a fait accompli necessarily that Ukraine falls.
It's not, because Russia really seems that bad.
Right.
It's really. But my point is, the narrative it sends to the Chinese is the U.S. will throw some words and some money at a thing, but they're not committed, right? So they're not going to be committed in Taiwan. And so we would basically, I think, be conceding both. And we would just say, we're not, sorry, Taiwan.
Well, wouldn't the easiest way my counterpoint to that would be, wouldn't the easiest way for China to take Taiwan be to wait for the United States of America to entangle ourselves in a military conflict with Russia? We're not, if we're in a military conflict with Russia, we're sure as hell not going to do anything militarily if Chinese take Taiwan. We're not going to get into a two-front hot zone.
No, but if we get engaged with Russia and Ukraine, it will be a short engagement because Russia does not have the capacity to really do anything about it.
If our purpose is to just push them out, off of that
right?
territory.
And then look, if Russia wants to escalate, that's an option, and they could. It would go poorly. What I think
for everybody.
Yes, and what I think China is actually waiting for is for the U.S. This is great for them. Russia's weakening itself by this grinding type war thing it's doing, and then China is going to be like, well, you are now a puppet state of us. I think it matters.
Well, this is frustrating because by the weak decision-making from the Biden administration, we put ourselves in a position where you and I sit here and debate, point, counterpoint,
right.
What about this, what about that? And as you're talking, I'm thinking, man, if I were advising China, I'm like, we're coming out good either way.
We don't have to do anything.
But either way, if they show the amount of weakness, I'm just from their perspective, if they show the amount of weakness that it would take to pull out and say we're not doing anything, my goodness, how weak that superpower has become. Let's take Taiwan.
Right.
Versus, they're entangling themselves in Russia. They're not going to do a single thing if we just go ahead and snatch Taiwan. I can make the case.
The edge that I give to the second scenario is we would quickly push Russia out. Like, we just know that. Militarily, Russia has not shown any ability. Now, if Russia says we want to engage World War III, basically, we want to engage you, that would be an entanglement, and I think Taiwan is the least of our problems.
Yeah, at that point, you're right.
But I just think it's far more likely that we clear out Russia from Ukraine. China says, well, they will punch you in the mouth. And then they just say, let's just maintain the status quo. The Chinese are very patient. So they have a military that rivals ours, if not surpasses ours already. And so they'll bide their time. I don't think they're going to jump in to save Russia.
See, I think, and I don't want to put thoughts in your head or words in your mouth, but I think some believe that there is a certain level of moral obligation that we have to Ukraine. And I don't believe that.
Sure.
I don't believe that we have a moral obligation to the rest of the countries around the world, unless we have put ourselves in a position where our word is on the line, such as NATO countries.
Yeah, I think we have more of a strategic issue here, right? Is one of, I kind of want to be really good friends with Taiwan because of China. I see the advantage of having a good relationship with Ukraine. I'd Marshall Plan. I'd say leverage assets. Say, hey, you've got to trade and help us out. But like, I do think we play on the global stage. America does. Either we decide we're no longer going to do that, and then China dictates terms around the world, or we say, no, we're still here. We're not going anywhere.
China's already offering to broker the peace between Ukraine and Russia. Did you see that?
I bet.
I mean,
let's make a deal. That's what they've been doing all over the globe.
Hold on a second. Are you now or have you ever been on the board of Burisma?
No.
Okay, I'm just checking. Just checking.
But you can check my laptop, man. No problem.
I want to see your Instagram account too. Can I?
Go for it.
Is that private already?
And I have learned not to use emojis, especially not those fire ones.
Is that article coming out soon?
Yeah, I think it may be online today, and then it'll probably be in print this weekend.
Is it dropping on the Tennessean? Is that where it is?
Yep.
All right, so find the article on the Tennessean on Lieutenant Governor Randy McNally. There's Cameron Smith. You hear him often on these airwaves, and hey, I thank you.
And I love you too, Matt.
Oh, no, I said I thank you.
Encouragement and engagement.
I love the donuts.
Well, hey, you asked, I delivered, man.
You knew I was bluffing, and you're so mean to do it because you knew exactly what I would do.
I knew you were on a diet.
And I did it too. I felt right. I feel like Joe Biden.
Yeah,
you're like Vladimir Putin in this scenario.
Yeah, tell me about your weakness.
250 on Supertalk.
What is going on right now over the Black Sea after a U.S. drone was hit by some Russian fighter jets? We talk about that, plus a reality TV star's son in trouble with the law right here in Tennessee. That and more. 3 Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Matt Murphy and you for a minute or two left. A lot of you responding to Cameron Smith and I discussing the pros and cons, ins and outs of what to do regarding the Ukraine-Russian situation. A lot of conversation, really trampolining off of a questionnaire that Tucker sent out. Tucker Carlson of Fox News sent a questionnaire to several of the Republican candidates. Donald Trump was one, Ron DeSantis, a potential candidate, Mike Pence, a potential candidate, Nikki Haley, a candidate. I think Mike Pompeo was in there, and there was one or two. Vivek Ramaswamy, he's announced. And they got responses back from most of them. And most of the responses were anti-further engagement or entanglement. You know, Donald Trump, of course, said that he could have I can have this handled 24 hours, no problem, solved, taken care of.
If it takes that long.
If it takes that long. And we would never be here if it weren't for. And I don't actually disagree with some of the things he's saying. Some of your comments, John writes in, Matt, what does Zelensky have on Joe and Hunter to keep sending billions and billions to him? Just wondering. I know a lot of people are wondering that, and that further mucks up the works. Alex says, I don't give a rip about Taiwan. We should rely on ourselves and our allies, not Taiwan. Well, I think Taiwan is an ally.
Yeah.
If Taiwan gets attacked, I hope they fight tooth and nail, but it's not our fight. And then 1833, isn't that how we got into a 20-year conflict that we eventually lost? Dan says Russia's making money hand over fist right now and is the most self-contained, self-sufficient power in the world. I don't know about that. Look, great comments, great conversation. Thank you to Cameron Smith. Thank you to Congressman John Rose. You can find these things on podcast. Brian Wilson in The Drive coming up next after Mac Maury and the news.
It's 3 o'clock. I'm Mac Maury with your top stories right now. 53 degrees and sunny. A beautiful day here in Music City, Middle Tennessee as well. Having a just good weather day after those few freezing days. Won't have that again tonight. You can put those outdoor plants back outside. Weather, traffic coming up.